College football looks like this. For the New Year's Six Bowl, Florida State did not get into the top four when it was all said and done, but still a fantastic matchup at the Orange Bowl against Georgia. Liberty, representing the group of five, will play Oregon in the Fiesta Bowl. News coming out that Bo Nix will be available and playing in this game, trying to rally some of the other guys to make a decision as well. But the Final Four in the national semifinals sees Washington and Texas in the Sugar, and then Michigan and Alabama in the Rose Bowl game, the national semifinals taking place on New Year's Day. Here's a look at Tom Fornelli's bowl rankings. These are just the top five. He actually texted our producer, Jack, the entire list. It was quite long. It looked like a CBS receipt, quite honestly. But we've narrowed it down to these selections, with Arizona and Oklahoma should be a high-scoring game of the Alamo Bowl. Take the over in that one, even though we're not showing it here on the queue. All right, so we've got Tom Fornelli put these rankings together. We also got Chip Patterson. It's a cover three. At least half of the gentlemen that make up the podcast, Danny Cannell and Bud Elliott, sans them here. So let's start with the Rose Bowl, Tom. Granddaddy of them all for a reason here, but take me through the gap between 1 and 2 and the decisions of the power rankings.
Well, the power rankings that I have for these bowl games, Tommy, they're highly scientific. Let's get that out of the way right now. There's a whole lot of math and stuff involved here. But no, I think when you look at the matchups, it was really difficult not to put this game at number 1 because, first of all, it's the Rose Bowl, which in itself, whether it's a playoff game or just a New Year's Six game in any given year, is always going to be one of the marquee bowl games in any calendar. But then this year, you've got Michigan and Alabama. You've got Michigan, a team that has won over 1,000 games in its history, the most of any college football program out there. And you've got Alabama, which has been the preeminent dynasty of the modern era with Nick Saban in charge. So these are two huge brands playing in a game in the Rose Bowl in a huge spotlight with the national title still on the line, because the winner of this game will move on to the title game. So when I broke it down, obviously the only real competition for the Rose Bowl at 1 was the Sugar Bowl with Texas and Washington. And while I think that's a great game too, there's just a little extra flowery kind of pageantry attached to this one to give the Rose Bowl the edge here.
Yeah, and a ton of meaning for Michigan because of the Big Ten's association with the Rose Bowl. Some of the most memorable and iconic Michigan football seasons have ended in the Rose Bowl. But how is the Rose Bowl going to end? Because as you're seeing right here, Jim Harbaugh, since he won his very first bowl game in 2015, nothing but L's, 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 L's. And not just losing outright, but also losing against the spread. The Wolverines have not been a good postseason team under Jim Harbaugh. You know, whether it is the mistakes that we saw, like the pick sixes against TCU, or whether it is just frankly getting worked in some bowl games that are not quite of the playoff stature. This is going to be an important moment for Michigan on a stage, the Rose Bowl, which means so much to Michigan fans, and then the Alabama portion, right? You just beat Georgia in the SEC championship. You have, by some ratings, one of the least talented and least dominant Alabama teams since the 2010 season. But I mean, go back to 4th and a mile, you know, go back to everything that Jalen Milroe has been able to do during this late season surge. He got some magic to him right now. So, you know, all the stakes that Tom just described, plus individually for Michigan and Alabama, what's on the line, it doesn't get any juicier than that.
You know, when the odds came out yesterday, guys, just minutes after Selection Day, it was -2.5 in favor of Michigan. We're already seeing Alabama money. Do not be surprised if everything stays the same injury-wise, that it gets down to a pick-em, or even Bama may be ending up as a favorite in that one. So, Tom, you talked about the number 2 game, which is the other national semifinal. Then we get to 3. And Florida State, which did not get into the Final Four, but they've got a great matchup here in South Florida against Georgia.
Yeah, and when I put these rankings together, to be clear, I can't predict who's going to opt out. I can't predict who's going to be entering the transfer portal. I just try to approach it from the best case scenario for all these games. And of the non-playoff games, this game has the highest ceiling available to them because you've got 2 teams who are sitting at home who believe they deserve a shot to be in the college football playoff. If you're Florida State, you're sitting there saying, we went undefeated and won our conference and we got left out. If you're Georgia, you're saying, how can you argue that we put in the 4 best teams and you leave us at home. Both teams have legitimate beefs going into this one. So if they show up ready to play, this is just going to be essentially a third playoff game. And if you're Florida State and you win this game, you get to claim that you're a national champion just like UCF did a few years ago. And depending on how things play out in the playoff, you might get a human poll to agree with you. So we might see a split national championship. So when you put those kind of stakes in the Orange Bowl, I couldn't rank it anywhere but 3.
Mike Norvell was named the ACC Coach of the Year. I think his toughest coaching job is what he has to do with this team over the next several weeks, because you're going to be on a massive stage against the Georgia Bulldogs. And if the Seminoles get outright embarrassed, then all of America gets to point and say, see, that's why you're not in the playoff. On the contrary, if you show up and win, like Tom said, you get to show off that 14-0 forever. And if you play well against a team like Georgia, then you finish the year understanding that those 13 wins, that wasn't just beating up on a schedule that wasn't as strong as other schedules. That had to do with what you were, the DNA of your team. And then the Georgia piece of this, in 2018, Georgia was defeated by Alabama in the SEC championship game and missed out on the college football playoff. They were relegated to the Sugar Bowl and got beat by a 4-loss Texas team. We all remember Sam Ehlinger, we're back. That Georgia team had a lot of opt-outs. That Georgia team did not show up with a mindset ready to compete against the Longhorns. And if Georgia brings that same 2018 mindset to this game and Mike Norvell's got the Seminoles charged up ready to go, well, then Georgia might get got. So like Tom, it's very tough to be able to understand who individually will or won't play. But I do understand that we're going to be walking away from this season with a different feeling about each one of these teams, depending on the outcome of this game.
So let's cherry pick a couple more games here, guys, and let's talk about the Citrus Bowl. Boy, they say styles make fights. You have polar opposites with Iowa and Tennessee here. Chip, I'm going to throw it back to you, though. So Tom has the Citrus Bowl just outside of the top 10 at 11. What are the chances you're shaking your head? Do you think they should be higher here?
Preposterous, disrespectful to the experience of waking up on New Year's Day. That first slate of games can be a little rough for a lot of individuals. So what would be more inspiring than seeing Iowa try to move the ball and score points? I mean, that'll get me up off the couch and be like, you know what, I can tackle 2024. And so yes, Tennessee against Iowa. It's going to be messy. It's going to look a little bit hungover, but it is going to be the perfect way to get your day started when you know you've got those playoff games later on. I love the styles make fights of this, and I love the time of day and the date.
Yeah, I wrote about this in the rankings. I said that this is kind of like an MMA match where you've got the one guy with all the really cool ninja moves who looks awesome, and he's just going up against a wrestler who wants to drag the guy to the ground and just sit on him until the bell rings and win the round, on points. That's exactly what this game is, because Tennessee is going to come out. They move quick. They're trying to score points. Their offense this year has not been as prolific as the Tennessee team we saw last year, but the goal is still the same. We want to put up 40 and kick your butt. Iowa's trying to play a 6-3 game, both because that's kind of the way it chooses to play and because that's its only real option, because it's not capable of scoring 40 points on anybody. So this is just one of those things, like you said, Tommy, styles make fights, and these are two very conflicting styles, and it will be interesting to see which one wins out at the end.
I cannot remember the last time Tennessee had a total in the mid-30s, by the way, so take that for what you will. It's usually nearly double that for every game. And then lastly, we got the Fiesta. It's going to be Liberty and Oregon, so we talked a lot about player availability. Bo Nix looks like he's going to give it a go, trying to get some of his teammates also to participate in this game. But guys, it also comes to motivation too. What are we thinking about the Ducks here in a New Year's Six Bowl going up against the G5 champ Chip Patterson?
Oh, they've got to be really careful, because what we've got in this game is two of the top 5 scoring offenses in the entire country. Liberty averaging more than 40 points per game at number 5. Oregon second nationally in scoring offense. So Caden Salter and the Liberty Flames, they're going to be able to put up points against Oregon, especially if Bo Nix can't talk some of those defensive players into playing in this game. On the other side, I don't know if Liberty defensively has the personnel to be able to stop Oregon. Oregon's offense, especially if Bo Nix is going to be in it. But games that get a little bit sideways and a little bit high scoring can help the underdog, at least in terms of being able to squeeze a few more points out of it, give yourself a little bit of hope, not necessarily having your belief extinguished early on. So, Oregon's got to be careful, because if they don't show up and if they are not sharp, Liberty gets up a couple touchdowns early, it could be a little bit interesting for the Ducks.
I don't want to derail the segment, but I will say I did find it somewhat funny when the selection committee told us that the reason it chose Liberty for this bowl was because even though it played a very weak schedule, it just kept winning games. Huh. Oh. Wonder why that matters for some teams and not others. Anyways, as for this game, I think Chip touched on it. The reason I don't have it ranked as highly is I like Liberty. Like, Jamie Chadwell steps in there, replaces Hugh Freeze, and they do not skip a beat in their first season in Conference USA. They were the best team in that league by far, and they were boat racing most of the teams that they went against. I think they won by an average of 16 points per game in conference play. Caden Salter is an electric, exciting player at the quarterback position. But as Chip mentioned, on the defensive side of the ball, I just do not think this Flames team has nearly enough to stop Oregon if Oregon shows up ready to play this game. The reason I have it ranked so low is if we get the Ducks, or at least 80% of the Ducks, this is probably not going to be very close for very long. So it's hard to rank it too high. But as is always the case in spots like this, I'm rooting for the underdog to win, because that's a whole lot more fun.
Guys, this is coming down just minutes ago, and it pertains to the Holiday Bowl, where Lincoln Riley has announced that Caleb Williams will not play in USC's game against Louisville. I was just double-checking that CBS list there, Tom. You had the Holiday Bowl in your top 10 at number 9. What's your initial reaction, and how far do you think you're going to move the Holiday Bowl down in your power rankings?
I'm not going to move it. This was anticipated. I didn't think there was ever a realistic shot of Caleb Williams playing in this game. The reason I have it ranked so highly is, like, as I said earlier, I rate games based on their ceiling, and this still has Lincoln Riley versus Jeff Brom, and they both get a month to prepare for it. So I think when you put those two offensive minds to work, this is a game that has the potential to be a very high-scoring, very fun game, which is exactly all you could really ask for from a bowl game that doesn't have high stakes attached to it. So I still think, with or without Caleb Williams, USC's got a whole lot of talent on the offensive side of the ball, and both of these teams are led by brilliant offensive minds.
Yeah, gentlemen, I'm just fantasizing about them putting freshman, so we're not going to be opting out for the draft, freshman Zachariah Branch at a Wildcat, right? You get Lincoln Riley to get 15 practices to scheme up like a wild Zach package for Zach Branch, and I mean, he might end up with 4 touchdowns. But Tom hit on it. The coaching part of bowl season in the opt-out transfer portal era becomes even more important. Who can put together a good game plan when you do have one arm tied behind your back or your star quarterback not participating? And Lincoln Riley and Jeff Brom are 2 stellar game planners and play callers. So yeah, I still think it's going to be a super exciting game, because I think that we're going to see some wild stuff on offense.
Guys, certainly appreciate it. Thanks for breaking down bowl season as we get ready for the college football postseason. Cover 3 podcast. Again, Chip, Tom, Bud, and Danny Cannell in New York City with an umbrella in the rain, talking about Florida State, the disappointment. Chip saying preposterous would have been the strongest word, but we had Dennis Dodd yesterday saying abominations.